Alright, what's up guys? So today, well I started last night, I'm changing front CV axles on a 2012 Chevy Equinox. Just show you the quick rundown, give you a couple tools you're going to need. I'll show you some quick tips on the driver's side. I already got it done, but this is some useful stuff that I wish I would have known when I first started. So here we go. Down in here, where this is a CV axle, runs from your knuckle over to the transmission there. And so there's a snap ring up inside of there. And the easiest way to get it out is to get a pry bar between the transmission and the axle. Just give it a quick nudge. See if I can show you here real quick. I've got some curved bars, look like this. What I'd like to do is get them in here behind the axle and against the transmission, and I just give it a quick shove, and it pops it right out. Sometimes what you can do is you can grab right here and pull really hard and it'll pop it out, but if that doesn't work, you'll need to do that. If it's really stuck, you can get a slide hammer with a hook on the end of it like this. You hook that back in there and you need to just slide hammer it out. They're relatively easy to get out. It's just that snap ring likes to hold it in place. But I'll start doing the other side and I'll go ahead and give you guys a quick rundown of the tools and stuff like that. Alright guys, quick rundown of some tools I got here. I was working late last night, so I have a flashlight. You need a socket set. I got a 1/2 inch and a 3/8. Of course you need sockets for everything. You're also going to need a set of large sockets. This one specifically uses a 36 for the axle nut. You need yourself a ratchet, a torque wrench. Torque is very important, don't let anyone tell you different. I got 2 torque wrenches. Got an impact for pulling the axle nut and the lug nuts off. It is not necessary, but it's extremely helpful. Oh, and a floor jack. Need a floor jack for getting the car off the ground.
Alright, so go ahead and pull that tie rod nut off. We're going to hit it with the hammer to get it out of there. You got to be careful tapping it because it is aluminum. Don't want to break or bend it. Gonna get that axle nut off real quick. Gonna pull the nuts off of the strut bolts here. We're gonna pull that bolt out of that brake line right now. You do that so when the knuckle folds forwards, it doesn't damage that line at all. We're gonna also separate this ABS wire here. Those ABS wires are really thin, and if you put any tension on them, you could break them. Go ahead and thread those nuts back on those strut bolts, so when you tap them out with the hammer, you don't damage the threads, because otherwise you have to either get new bolts or retap those threads, and that's just a pain. So we're going to go ahead and tap this axle with the hammer to get it out of the wheel bearing. Only do this if you're replacing it. Don't do it if you're going to reuse the same axle.
Alright guys, some quick tips here. The passenger side is always the more difficult side on all front wheel drive cars. See if I can get you in here real quick. The axle is actually longer on this side. It usually has the normal looking part of the axle from here to there. Then it goes from that carrier bearing right there into the transmission. On most cars, you'll end up changing that whole section from the transmission out, so you have to pull the carrier bearing right here off the back of the engine. Not too difficult, usually just a couple bolts. But these ones here, they design them like this, so they're exposed to the elements. Water and rust will get down inside this hole and it'll seize up really bad. So I'm going to try to get it off without having to pull the whole thing out. But on these, typically what you have to do is you have to pull the whole shaft with the carrier bearing, and then you have to end up cutting off the inside of the axle here and then cutting a couple grooves down it so you can get it peeled off. This one is fairly rusty, at least in those parts. I sprayed WD-40 on it last night, but we're gonna try to pull it apart the way it is, get my pry bar back there and see if I can shimmy it out. Alright, so as you guys can see, that one came off the pry bar pretty easy. That's not normally the case. This is the first one I think I've ever actually done where that came off without having to cut it off. I think it helped that I sprayed it with WD-40 last night. But anti-seize is crucial for all of these style components. Oh man, getting it on everything. Help out the next guy is going to do it. Go ahead and slather some anti-seize around there. I've got the copper stuff right now. They have silver or copper. Silver works great for this kind of stuff. So when you install these new ones, you get it on there, get it lined up with the splines like that. Then you just kind of give it a quick shove and it slides right on. Give it a couple extra shoves, make sure it's on good, and that part's done. Alright guys, we're gonna anti-seize these splines too. Those go into the wheel bearing right there. Can't really see in there. Let me grab my light. See how messy it is inside of there? Anti-seize stops that, stops it from getting stuck. And I guarantee you the next guy who gets in there is going to thank you for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray it out with WD-40. Try to get as much of that rust out of there as I can. And then I'm going to go ahead and slather some anti-seize around here and put it all back together.
Alright, so for putting it back together, you're going to install the axle into the wheel bearing first. You got to make sure it's as straight as possible. Those blinds can be damaged. You can also damage the thread that the nuts goes onto. Sometimes eyeballing it from the outside will help you line it up straighter. This is very important. You don't want to damage that new axle you just put in there. Once you get that in, you're going to line the knuckle up with the holes in the strut. Sometimes tapping it with a hammer will do it. In this case, I had to pull the pry bar out and line the holes up using that way. Go ahead and put that bottom one in and install the top one. Tap it with the hammer a little bit. These are splined also, so when you go to stick the nut on, if they're not tapped in a little bit, the bolt will just spin. Go ahead and snug those up. Don't get them too tight because you don't want to strip them out, but you want to make sure that knuckle's not going to move when you start driving. We're going to install the axle nut now. This gets torqued down to 155 on this car specifically. We're going to put a pry bar in the lug studs here, hold everything in place. This keeps tension off of the axle and off of the transmission, lessens the chance that you will damage parts. Don't tighten these up with a impact because you can damage the wheel bearing. Go ahead and just take the time and do it by hand. Now that we got that, we're going to install the tie rod. Go ahead and run that nut down with impact if you'd like. Just till it touches though, don't tighten it down with that. This needs to be torqued also. This one gets 35 foot-pounds. This is very important to be torqued down properly. You don't want it backing off. If you over tighten it, you can damage parts also. We're going to go ahead and install the brake line here and then the ABS wire to that.
Last here is for jacking the car. You always find a solid spot to jack from. So cars, SUVs, things like that. I like to go to the frame where I can. This holds up the motor, so I know that's really solid. It holds up the subframe, which holds up the motor, so I know that's solid. Another good spot to go from is the pinch weld right here. That is a super solid spot. When you take it to a shop, that's where they lift it from, is right there. Either spot's just as good. You do want to be careful here though. If you're in a northern state or somewhere where it's rusty, if you start lifting from that, it'll fold over sideways and put a big old dent in your floorboard. So just be careful with that.
Alright, so when you're wanting to put the wheel back on, start those nuts with your hands, otherwise you could cross thread it. Now when you go to tighten it up with the impact, you want to do a star shape. This ensures a solid seat all the way around the tire. Got the wrong socket there first. Once you get them snugged, but not super tight, you want to sit the car back down, and you do want to torque it to specifications. This is very important, otherwise it will back off.
Alright guys, so I did have fluid spill out of this axle when I pulled it out. So being thorough, you need to double check the fluid level. And this nut right here is how you check it. You got to get your transmission up to operating temperature, which is typically about somewhere between 110 140. And you pull this plug, and if transmission fluid spills out, you're full. If it doesn't come out of there, then you need to add some. So if I need to add some, I'll show you that. I'll probably just go ahead and show you anyways. But I just took it for about a 5-minute drive, got it up top rating temperature. And so I'm gonna pull that plug and check my fluid real quick. All right, see, I got fluid trickling out. That means we're good. So I'll go ahead and pop that back in, put the tire back on, and call her golden. All right, guys, lighting's really terrible. But down in there's a little screw cap. I'll take it off for you. There will be a cap that looks like that. That is your transmission fill, so it's between the fuse box and the battery, down on top of the transmission, way down in there. You'll have to stick a long funnel in there, and then you fill it up until it starts coming out that hole in the side that I showed you, and you're golden. Thanks for watching, guys. Yeah, so for the most part, every car is about the same. You'll have different size nuts and different steps along the way, but you'll figure it out as you go. That's just a basic rundown. Thanks for watching.